I'm Jess Larson. This is our Operational Excellence mini-series. We're here with part two of our interview with Roger Price.
Well, I think part of it gets back to one of the comments you made earlier about kind of the old like assembly line mass production environment, where that was exactly the intent, was to break jobs down into very simple tasks, take hammer, hit nail, take hammer, hit nail, and repeat that process for hours on end, and not to actually engage the workforce in how to make that process better. So some of it's just tied into kind of the history of manufacturing or the history of how businesses have been run.
This is another episode of our Innovation and Leadership series where we interview pro athletes, world-class musicians, CEOs, Hollywood filmmakers, and a wide variety of other high achievers. Before we get rolling, I want to invite you to get involved with Child Rescue, the charity our founders started. To learn more about them, just come to our website, icollective.co, and check on the Child Rescue tab on our menu. Also, I want to talk to you about one of our show's sponsors. I met these guys back on episode 6. CEO Zach Smith was telling me all about starting a skateboard company and how much he hated doing the bookkeeping for a skateboard shop, and how he really got led to start this business, Bookly, that's a hybrid combining bookkeeping software and human services. And I'll tell you why I let him become a sponsor. It's because I use their service now. I don't love paying $50 an hour for bookkeepers to do stuff that I know software could do way, way cheaper. But I don't love bookkeeping at all. So I want a real live human who knows what they're talking about to help me with the stuff I don't understand. Probably the straw that broke the camel's back for me, though, the thing that put me over the top was that they could do my taxes and payroll also. So totally suggest checking them out. Go to their website, bookly.co, and check out their flat rates. I've been super happy with them. So now on to today's episode. CEO at Phase 5 Group with their online product Eon. If you didn't listen to part 1, please go back and hear about Eon and how they've done these projects and helped with continuous improvements. Big giant companies like DuPont helping out 200 different facilities, and now they've got a software as a service product that can help people standardize this across multiple sites. How do I do for an intro there, Roger? Is that a good description?
Yeah, no, it was great, Jess. Thanks.
Well, listen, for everybody who doesn't really know the magic of why lean creates such nuts like me about it, can you give some examples of what got you interested in the space initially, and just some of the biggest client successes you've seen of this model?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, happy to. Yeah, and I mean, to your point, Jess, I mean, there's no shortage of books or content that talk about lean, and the concept has kind of taken off, a life of its own over the past number of years, and a lot of the concepts and methods come out of manufacturing, certainly, though not all of them do, but the application of lean, outside of manufacturing now is tremendous. And obviously in the technology side, agile software development, as an example, is, really derived. Some of those concepts are really derived from kind of lean manufacturing principles, right? But basically, lean was a term that was applied to a lot of the work that Toyota and other Japanese companies have been doing really since the 50s. It's really about how to understand your operations and understand where the waste resides and how to generate a competitive advantage through waste elimination and continuous improvement from an operations perspective. When applied properly, the concepts behind lean can really power the business on a number of fronts. They can eliminate costs. They can drive throughput increases, so more productivity. If done through engagement of the broader workforce, you can really use lean to really improve overall employee commitment and discretionary effort as well. Again, lean is really an umbrella term for a series of methods and concepts, and ultimately a culture of waste identification, waste elimination, and continuous improvement that can be applied in a variety of ways. From our perspective, we've worked with a number of companies. You mentioned DuPont. I'll just use them quickly as an example. We helped DuPont which was at the time about a $40 billion company, 240 or so plant sites globally, very diverse business, diverse business units, everything from growing corn and soybean to paints to crop protection chemicals for crop protection and a variety of other use cases. Large, diverse organization, and going to their plant sites, you could still see where they were missing opportunities to, reduce cost or improve safety or, get more product out the door to their customers. And so the DuPont production system work was designed to systematically go, from site to site, understand where the waste was, and then put together a plan that engaged the employee base in understanding and systematically eliminating that waste. And that work that we did with DuPont, as they undertook that work, they were generating hundreds of millions of dollars per year in value to the business in the form of cost savings, in the form of freed up working capital, in the form of capacity release, so making more product that they could sell, not deferring having to build new plants because they were getting more product out the door at their existing plants. All sorts of ways that value is being generated from that work. The critical thing, though, was understanding, and in every case, it's understanding what matters to my business operationally, what differentiates me operationally, and then what am I doing to systematically improve at that. And let me give you one other example. We have a client in the food industry, about $1 billion company, 9 plant sites in North America that we're working with, and that's using our product Eon. If you know anything about food production, you know that one of the critical aspects of that space is what they call food safety. Right, so food safety and product quality. So, basically making product that smells like you expect it to and is not contaminated in any way, so it won't make people sick or anything like that. And if you have one of those issues in the food business, it's huge trouble. I mean, and there have been some stories, I won't name names, but there have been some stories out there the past couple of years of companies that have lost tremendous market value or had to shut down completely because the food product they were making ultimately made people sick. And so in that space, the consequence of failure around food safety is high. So for them, it's about quality management and continuous improvement concepts and methods to food safety and product quality. And we were able to work with them to take their own internally developed quality management model that defined all of the standards about how to make their food product safely and to customer specification. We put those into Eon. They deployed it to those 9 locations and then built a really nice governance process over the top of it to make sure that all of the plants were using that model to manage their plant operations. And they were able to basically reduce their cost of poor quality by about $6 million over a 12-month period, and significantly reduce the risk that the product they were making would not meet their food safety requirements. Right. That's an example of the sort of value that can be generated from the application of these concepts and methods. But every business is different. If you're a tech startup, the things that differentiate you competitively are going to be different than a large food manufacturer. So you might be applying or need to apply, the lean concepts to your product development engine or to your sales and marketing engine. So the application might be different, but some of the underlying concepts around waste elimination and continuous improvement would apply in just about any environment.
And, the $6 million is great, but it sounds like lowering the risk of having their food not qualified as safe is equally as important to them there.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And again, the concept there wasn't that they weren't already doing really good work there, because, every food manufacturer, that I've ever worked with a bunch, take that very, very seriously. But because the consequence of failure is so high, to the company and obviously to the individual consuming the product, you're never going to stop trying to get better there, right? That's why the concept of continuous improvement, that's why that is the term that it is, right? It's not improvement to get to a certain level and say job well done and kind of move on. It's where do we need to be operationally differentiated, or where do we need to reduce risk in the business operationally speaking, and what are we doing and to address that and do it in a way that makes everybody feel comfortable that we're getting better. That mindset is really what we're talking about when we talk about lean. And then underneath that, there's a whole series of tools, like some of which we talked about in part one, like 5S or visual management or structured problem solving or standard work. That's all kind of tools that sit underneath the larger mindset of, can we find waste? Do we know what matters to the business? Are we getting better at the things that really matter to the business systematically? And then the tools come into play, as you address those things.
Yeah, for sure. Well, when you think about the progression, I mean, as you said, I mean, we've been talking about Shingo and the Shingo Institute. Mr. Shingo started consulting to Toyota back in like 1955, right? And helped with some of those aspects of the Toyota production system. As we're about to hit 2020 here, not too long, can you talk about where you see the future of this work, which obviously has, the methodology has evolved, but in some ways stood the test of time. You guys are bringing it into the 21st century a little bit with this software as a service product. What else do you see as the future of operational excellence, continuous improvement?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think what we have seen, what I have personally seen over my years working in this space, and I think what continues to be a frustration point or a pain point for a lot of organizations and a lot of people for whom continuous improvement or operational excellence it's their job. They're either a CI leader, like a head, VP of OpEx or VP of Lean Six Sigma, or maybe they're a practitioner, or maybe they're just a business leader somewhere in the business that believes in the concepts. There continues to be a struggle to get over what we call the adoption hump, and what we mean by that is continuous improvement or OpEx not being seen as a program that will be implemented and at any point could go away if the business struggles or if it doesn't meet some set of objectives. Therefore, there's always this sort of sort of Damocles, so to speak, hanging over the head of the function. Generate results or else. So there's been this constant battle to get over the adoption hump and make, I think, a focus on OpEx a core aspect of the business, in the same way that you'd always have a focus on sales and growth, or a focus on talent management. Regardless of the business conditions, you're always going to have certain aspects of the business that you're going to focus on, because if without them you can't survive. And I think OpEx needs to get there. And our view on that is goes back to a little bit of something I said in part one, but I think it's probably worth reiterating, is that if the approach to OpEx is tools led, we're going to go do this thing called 5S, or we're going to go teach employees how to do 5 why problem solving, or we're going to go put visual boards up and track a bunch of metrics. And it's let's go get the tool out there. If it's tools driven, or if it's just about going and finding a bunch of money right away, then you're never going to get over the adoption hump. You're always going to struggle with sustainability, and you're always going to be fighting the risk of regression. So for companies to get over the adoption hump, they just need to be more strategic in how they introduce CI into the organization. And they need to be more principles focused and willing to allow a slightly longer germination period on the results, but it'll pay itself forward. It'll be worth it down the road, because you won't have regression. You'll have the sustainability, and then at some point, take Toyota as an example. Like Toyota, is synonymous with lean. It's a part of the culture. It's not something that could ever be ripped out of the DNA of the organization, because it's in the DNA of the organization. And I think, the future for OpEx is strategic management in order to get over the adoption hump, and get to a place where people aren't questioning the value that it brings the organization. They're simply looking for ways to, improve the way they implement. We obviously think that some of the tools we provide help in that regard, but there's obviously more to it than that as well.
So I actually think this is a good place to pause for just a minute to tell you about one of our show sponsors. I was actually pretty excited when Skillshare reached out. A lot of our listeners know I'm a real learning nerd, really into the audiobooks and things like this. And these guys have a ton of great classes. There's like 16,000 classes on their website, but you only pay one monthly price. You don't have to pay per class like a number of the services out there. So it's unlimited access with a low monthly price kind of thing. But the breadth of the classes and the quality of them, I'm actually really impressed with. I was on there for just a few minutes and I had like a dozen classes I've saved to take. There's stuff on social media marketing, mobile photography, logo design, just all sorts of things for growing a business or creative things. And what's nice is they're letting me give away a free month. If you go to Skillshare.com/leader, you can get a free month. The class that I would recommend for sure right off the bat, though, is from Seth Godin. I'm a big Seth Godin fan, read all his books. A lot of my friends are too. But he's got a class on there called the Modern Marketing Workshop that I really could not recommend enough. I actually think it's better than a number of his books because it's super broken down, specific how-tos. Answer this question for yourself, make a plan, write it down. It's not as much general marketing advice. It's like specific. You need to do stuff different if you watch this. Anyways, Skillshare.com/leader, get a free month. There's tons of stuff on there worth checking out. But my personal recommendation, the Modern Marketing Workshop by Seth Godin, is the one that I think you should at least check out. Anyways, let's get back in the interview. Well, we're going to take a bit of a right turn for a minute, and then I want to come back to this. We've got a standard question we like to ask all our guests. It's about the charity we started, Child Rescue, that's trying to prevent child trafficking. And if you were our marketing consultant and you were trying to help us think of ways to get more people involved in protecting kids, what comes to mind for you? What's something that would be an idea you'd give us?
Yeah, I mean, I think, with the topic like, an issue like child trafficking, I think the more folks can personally connect to the issue, the more likely that they're going to be to want to do something about it, right? So how do you drive a personal connection? How do you make something like that feel real? I think to a lot of us, I'll speak for me, not for others. But we live in, I live in the United States. So we're in a developed country. I think there's kind of an implicit assumption that child trafficking doesn't happen here; it happens somewhere else, and therefore I can sort of emotionally disconnect myself from it. But right, if you can sort of personalize the challenge a bit more, I think folks will connect with the issue and want to do something about it. I mean, I know in my own experience, my wife and I, got involved in fostering here in Montgomery County, Maryland, where we live. One of the reasons why we got involved and became foster parents was because another member of our church and his wife got involved in fostering, and we got to know their personal circumstance as well as the children that they were, some of the children that they were fostering. And it really kind of connected first with my wife and then with me that, hey, there's a real need, in our community, for that. And that personal connection then led us to go ahead and take the steps to get certified and ultimately do that. And so I think, again, the application to your circumstance, I think, might be somewhat similar. in that if you can create a personal connection in people's minds and hearts, I think they're more likely to, want to take steps to address it.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Tying it back into what this whole episode's been about, and thinking about continuous improvement and the ways you guys are progressing the field with the technology you've added. It does make me think. You were talking about the lean principle of 5S and this standardization and cleaning up things so that we aren't wasting motion trying to find stuff to get our jobs done. And you said, at least this is what I got from it. You didn't say it like this, so correct me if I'm interpreting you wrong, but it was almost hey, listen, if you show up and you tell everybody you got to do this because I said you got to do this, you're going to get resistance. But if you can get that emotional tie to how this makes their life better, how this matters to something they care about as far as getting their work done, all of a sudden the program is for them instead of for us in management. And I don't know, the parallel I'm seeing here is, if we can get people to be having their own personal connection to why helping these kids is a personal experience for them rather than a you should, that we're likely to get higher adoption. Is that a fair comparison?
Yeah, I think that's probably right. I mean, it's I think the personal connection, relating to the challenge, relating to the issue, and feeling like it's something that's local, or it's something that could affect someone I know and love, or anything that sort of makes people sort of personally resonate with the topic, I think is gonna help drive action for sure.
That's great. Well, thanks for going on the detour with us. I think before we end here, maybe let's take one more principle. Let's talk about something like standard work. For people who aren't familiar with that term, maybe we'll get you to give us an explanation again, and then how technology can help it. And let's give a context like, for instance, one of our clients, they're a big building supply company. And so they've got a couple different factory locations out west here that they got, a 2-day introduction to this world, and then kind of, we're blessed. Hey, you guys are continuous improvement, and haven't really had that, those meaningful repetitions, and haven't had the follow-up. So, probably relatively safe to assume that different plants are not getting standard work done exactly the same way, because they kind of feel like lean was done to them instead of with them. Can you talk about, again, brief intro to what standard work is and why technology can help it?
Sure. Yeah, standard work as a concept is fairly simple. I mean, sort of resident in the title. And the idea is that, folks in similar job roles should be doing their job in a highly consistent way. And that consistent way should be the best way that the job should be done, right? So the analogy I sometimes use is, take Olympic swimming. There's a variety of different swim strokes. And the freestyle swimming is actually, I don't know if a lot of folks know this, but like freestyle swimming is you can actually swim any stroke you want, but every single Olympian that participates or competes in a freestyle event swims the same way, right? It's the arm over arm motion, right? They don't choose to do the breaststroke, or they don't choose to do the butterfly, or they don't choose to do any other motion that they just made up on their own. They do the same motion that we all know and learn as kids, because it's the fastest way to get up and down the pool, right? So freestyle allows you to do whatever you want, but everybody does it the same way. And the same concept applies in our work environment as well. That standard work is about, at different levels of the business, identifying what are the standard tasks and routines and activities that need to happen to keep the operation moving the right way and to create more predictable and consistent outcomes. And then how do you do that? In a manufacturing context, it's, you've got 4 machine operators because you're a 4-shift operation. So 4 different people who are running that machine for their shifts. How do you make sure all 4 of those shift operators, kind of manage and run the machine the same way? Because if they're doing it in a wildly different way, you will get wildly different results from that work. And the same thing applies at a leadership level as well. The ratio of standard work to discretionary work changes as you move up the organization, but fundamentally there should be a level of standardization in how, managers and supervisors do their job as well. So that's the concept behind it. technologically speaking, Eon doesn't do this, but obviously there are tools that you can use that to create standard operating procedures and standardize on those, and then train on those standard operating procedures, and then make those standard operating procedures available and visible such that folks can refer to them and use them to do their job better. So there's some standardization that can be done procedurally speaking, training that can be provided on the value of standard work. And how it's not about making you a robot, it's about making you more efficient at your job so that you can continuously improve. What Eon would do there is we would provide the ability for companies to define their expectations for standard work in the product, and then deploy those expectations to all of their locations, and then manage the implementation of standard work. So have you developed all the right standard operating procedures? Have you trained employees on the concepts of standard work? Are you auditing or observing standard work taking place in the operation? Are you taking steps if standard work does not exist to address those? Kind of the managing process of how to implement standard work would be managed through Eon. But the underlying concept can apply in any environment. It's about standardizing on the best way to do critical job tasks, so that you're getting predictable outcomes and more efficient operations.
Well, I want to talk just before we end here. I know we're running out of time, but before we end here, I want to double down on this concept that you talked about. It's not about becoming a robot. I feel like what you're saying was it's kind of the idea of learning from the best and adopting, the rest of us recognizing, hey, so and so figured out a way to swim faster. Why don't we all learn from someone who's made some progress?
Yeah.
Why do you think that people get confused about that? Why do you think when they hear about some of this stuff that if there's not enough understanding, that at first it could feel like, you're trying to take away my individuality?
Yeah. Well, I think part of it gets back to one of the comments you made earlier about kind of the old assembly line mass production environment, where that was exactly the intent, was to break jobs down into very simple tasks. Take hammer, hit nail, take hammer, hit nail, and repeat that process for hours on end, and not to actually engage the workforce in how to make that process better. So some of it's just tied into kind of the history of manufacturing or the history of how businesses have been run in the United States and potentially elsewhere as well, but certainly in the United States, right? So there's a historical mindset that you're fighting there as well. The other part of it, though, is that a lot of times people's perception of their value to the organization is tied into what they know that nobody else does, right? So my perception of value is, I perceive myself to have value to my company potentially because if we have this problem, I know I'm the only one who can fix it. Therefore, I am now irreplaceable, right? At some fundamental level, there is a sense of that, right? And then when you start introducing a concept like standard work, in which what we're saying is we want to take that tacit knowledge that you have, that's not documented anywhere, but the best way to do some of these things and other people don't. And we want to leverage that knowledge to make the rest, everybody else better at their job. And by the way, they know some things about their job that maybe you don't, and you can learn from them, and we can all get better together. The underlying belief is, well, now I'm being made replaceable. And so, if that's not messaged properly, and if folks don't understand that, that's not the objective here. The objective here is to make everybody more efficient because we don't want you fighting fires when something breaks down. We want to leverage your knowledge and capability to look at this standard process and show us how we can make it even better. So we're going to leverage your knowledge and your capability in a different way, not to fight fires, not to be reactive to problems, but to get better. To use a swimming analogy, once you standardize on this is the way I'm going to freestyle swim, then the focus of the swimmer is how do I get out of the blocks faster? How do I make my turns faster? How do I get more efficient in the water? How do I draft better off of the person next to me in the water? Right? They're still working to always get better times. It's not like standardizing on the stroke has eliminated the need to improve. It's provided the basis by which they can decide what needs to improve. But if that's not messaged properly, then you're going to get pushback. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, no, I like what you're saying. I feel like I feel like somebody who's done that well. We had Gary Peterson on from OC Tanner. You know, those guys won the Shingo Prize and have been living it for a while. And I feel like they've done a great job at having that place feel like we are actually on a team trying to win together as a team, rather than it's about my career versus your career. And just the other things they've done in the business of taking care of people. I mean, I can just imagine if they got so efficient that they eliminated somebody's job, that person doesn't get fired in that company. That person gets reallocated to something else. You know what I mean? So it's not a safety thing for my personal career, because I have the confidence that this is the kind of organization that treats me like family member, you know? And that's where it feels like the most, you know, everybody's willing to bring that discretionary effort when they know that it's not just going to benefit the boss, it's going to benefit me too, right?
Totally agree. And I mean, you know, companies we work with that have done that well have done what you said. Either we reallocate the resources, or, you know, we figure out how to manage with fewer headcount through kind of natural attrition, as opposed to somebody walks in one day and they no longer have a job, right? So there are ways to address that if the efficiencies get to a point where those things come into play. But then there's also there's a larger point, and this gets to the change management aspects of continuous improvement, is that, you know, we sometimes don't give the workforce enough credit for understanding the broader dynamics at play in the economy or in the industry, right? So getting more efficient and improving the way we operate is fundamental to the survival of a lot of businesses, right? So it's not about one headcount here or there, or even a handful of headcount here or there. It's about, if we're not continuously raising the bar on performance, we run the risk that somebody else who is raising the bar on performance, some other company, some other competitor, will just simply outcompete us. And then it's a totally different conversation about the survival of the business. And I think, you know, again, part of introducing CI into the organization is to open up employees' ideas and minds to, you know, the importance of this, not just for them. Of course, that has to be addressed. But hey, this organization needs to continue to improve, because no one else is standing still either. And they can, you know, and the workforce can understand that, and that can drive some urgency to improve.
Love it. Well, listen, appreciate all the time you spent with us today. Again, if people want to connect with you or come see more about your product, you want to give your website again?
Sure. It's www.phase5group.com, PHASE, the number 5, group.com. And, you know, please visit. We've got lots of great resources there, and obviously would love to connect directly with anybody who's interested.
Yeah, so I think everybody who's listened will recognize you know what you're talking about, and Roger does. They're big content marketers too, so I would recommend going through their site and seeing all the other things they can do if this is the kind of world that you're interested in looking at further. Thanks again for making time, Roger.
Thank you, Jess.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
That was part 2 of our interview. If you missed part 1, please go back an episode and download the episode before this one for the first half of the interview. As always, please check icollective.co for show notes of things referenced during the interview and to learn more about our guest. And if you're interested, we'd love to have you learn more about the charity Child Rescue. Go to the menu page on iCollective and click on Child Rescue. Thanks so much.